On this edition of ITG, the spring portal window closed a week ago, but the roster additions keep rolling into Morgantown. We'll take a look behind each name on this episode of In the Gun.
You are now watching Believe.
Mountaineer Nation.
You are In the Gun.
Because once you enter this family, there's no getting out.
All right, Mr. Scott, energize.
Welcome to it, folks. I'm Jed Drenning. This episode of In the Gun is brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here. The spring transfer portal window opened on April 16th and closed on the 25th. And, as expected, roster chaos ensued across the college football landscape. The Pushkar Center in Morgantown in recent weeks has looked more like Ellis Island in the New York Harbor in the early 1900s. The constant flow of player traffic has meant the doors have barely had a chance to swing shut as the WVU staff has restocked its roster with a flurry of additions since the spring window opened. We're going to sort through the commotion and discuss each one of those additions here in just a minute. That's why this episode is being posted, to get you up to speed on all these new Mountaineers. But as we do, keep in mind more are coming. Maybe even by the time this video posts, as West Virginia continues to visit with more players this weekend. The end is not in sight. This is going to be a work in progress through even the early portions of the summer. Now, the good news for Mountaineer fans, this isn't Rich Rodriguez's first invite to the portal rodeo, so to speak. A lot's been made of the fact Coach Rod flipped the Jack State roster last year with more than 60 new players in the span of one off season to win the Sun Belt Conference title. But trust me when I say, Rich has been at this roster overhaul stuff a lot longer than just 12 months. When I transferred from WVU for my first season at NAIA member Glenville State 30 plus years ago, it was my third school. I was one of 15 new starters Rich brought in from outside the program to help try and turn things around. 15 new starters out of a possible 22. We were a scattered assortment of D1 transfers, JUCO standouts, and talented cast-offs from other small schools. Heck, even a Canadian or two was thrown into the mix for good measure. Coach Rod was dipping into the portal way before it was even cool. And here he is, all these decades later, continuing to refine the art of talent acquisition through an open market. And that's what we're seeing play out in Morgantown right now. When asked this spring to forecast the offseason needs of his roster, Coach Rod didn't mince words.
Yeah, we need to get some O-line and D-linemen. We need to get some wideouts, a running back. Probably need to get some linebackers, a corner, safety, and a couple D-linemen. Like what a quarterbacks you're at. We got some competition there, but long snapper and got a quarterbacks.
As you'll see in these player breakdowns, he wasn't kidding. We're going to start on the offensive side of the football, where the additions to the roster are already, since the spring, the new additions to the roster are already into the double digits. What better place to start than the running back room, a running back room that at this juncture will include the likes of course, Jaheim White, Ty Edwards brought in this spring, Dior Hubbard, a holdover from last year. But one of the first additions that Mountaineer fans can get excited about, running back Jalen Knighton, very explosive football player. SMU, Miami, Rooster Knighton. Now, it didn't hurt that when he was in high school down in Florida, he was recruited by a couple staff members currently at West Virginia. Larry Porter, running backs coach Larry Porter, Travis Trickett, senior offensive analyst. They both had a pre-existing relationship from recruiting circles with Jalen Knighton when he was at Deerfield Beach and ran for over 5,000 yards, a highly productive high school career. Now, overall, a body of work at the college level that includes nearly 2,000 yards on the ground, 1,979, and 17 touchdowns. In 3 years at Miami, again, started his college career at Miami before transferring over to SMU more recently. In those 3 years with the Hurricanes, he ran for nearly 1,200 yards, and in the 2 years at SMU, an additional 788 yards and 7 touchdowns. Missed most of last year with an injury, only played early. 4 times times in his career, he's gone over 100 yards rushing. Big games against Georgia Tech when he was at Miami, including a career-high 162 against the Jackets in 2021. 4.4 yards per carry on his 453 career attempts. Now, this is a kid that is a legit home run threat. He's one of these guys that can plant a toe and separate. He's explosive. Want proof? He had the longest run of the year in college football in 2023, a 95-yard touchdown against Charlotte. He had touchdown catches when he was at Miami of 75 and 60 yards. A truly explosive player that is capable of big, big things. And talk about the passing game. Those weren't the only plays that he's made in his career as a receiving threat. 57 career catches for over 600 yards, an 11-yard per catch average. So very dynamic as a weapon out of the backfield in the throw game as well. 5 touchdowns as a receiving asset. Versatile from a scheme standpoint. When you look back to what he was doing at Miami, first of all, he played for Rhett Lashley, ultimately followed Rhett Lashley to SMU, and that SMU staff coached him up. But his final year at Miami, he was actually playing for Josh Gaddis. Now, as an offensive coordinator, Josh Gaddis introduced more gap concepts, not as much zone. And as a gap runner, you saw Knighton be very effective in that final year at Miami. Then he moves on to SMU, proves that he's a very good zone scheme runner. SMU loves to run the stretch play, the outside zone. Again, we mentioned Rhett Lashley, but remember, at SMU, former Mountaineer that played for Coach Rodriguez, Garin Justice, is their O-line coach and co-offensive coordinator. So a lot of parallel in the schemes in the run game. This is a guy whose vision is okay. It's just he's so dynamic that once he does find a crease, he can truly make some big, big things happen. You're going to see some explosive plays out of Jalen Knighton. Now, the downside, 8 career fumbles. Most of those, as a Hurricane, have to hold on to the footballs. So, Mountaineer fans, a lot to be excited about. Jalen Knighton, nicknamed Rooster, but once again, a highly explosive football player at the running back spot for West Virginia. Another recent addition to the running back room, and something tells me Mountaineer fans are going to be fascinated by Cannon Katzer. Not a big guy, 5'9", $190. He grew up in Spokane, Washington. First of all, his speed is real. He's topped out at 22.75 miles per hour on the GPS, so he does have real speed. Go back and watch his high school tape. You see a lot of wing tee concepts. He was used in a lot of jet sweeps out of that wing spot to get him on the perimeter with the football in his hands so he could showcase his talents, and he does have plenty of talent. As a senior in Spokane, ran for over 2,500 yards, then was a PWO walking on at Washington State, a couple touchdowns in Wazoo's spring game. He did appear in one game in his 2 seasons in Pullman, 6 carries for 54 yards in a blowout win over Colorado State. He transferred out of Washington State to Citrus College, a JC in Glendale, California. 1 year at Citrus, ran for nearly 1,000 yards, 975. Again, productive. 16 touchdowns, 22 catches at Citrus that one season, a couple touchdown receptions at Citrus. More recently, in 2024, last season, he transferred to Division II powerhouse Ferris State up in Big Rapids, Michigan. The thing about Cannon Katzer, you get consistent production. And this number really speaks to that. He led the nation at the FCS level a year ago, last season, with 8.8 yards per carry. He helped the Bulldogs win the Division II national title. In fact, the only game they lost was the season opener on the road at Pittsburgh State in Kansas. He didn't play in that football game. Every football game that Cannon Katzer played in, Ferris State did win. Now, there were a lot of blowouts. And when I say blowouts, I mean scores like 84-7, 78-17. Ferris State was throttling some of these teams. So what that meant, limited carries in a lot of these games for Cannon Katzer and, for that matter, for the starters. As a result, he ran for 1,128 yards. Would have been a lot more, but like I said, those carries were limited, double-digit touchdowns. He ends up reaching the end zone on the ground 11 times. 21 catches, a chunky 14-yard average per catch. He had 3 touchdown receptions. And again, when you watch some of their tape, you'll see that he was weaponized in the RPO game as a downfield asset. And they did a nice job utilizing him in that role. He did return some kicks, a couple here, a couple there. That's not a huge part of what he did. What's interesting is over the course of the last couple seasons, when you combine Ferris State and Citrus College, this is a kid who's been part of a 22-4 record. So he's used to winning. That's one more thing that you want to infuse your locker room with. And I couldn't help but think, when I saw Cannon Katzer, a walk-on from a Midwest small college where he was a 1,000-yard rusher, one thing came to mind. Sure, they're only separated in size by 6 inches and 70 or so pounds, but the last time West Virginia hauled in a passionate, small college, 1,000-yard rusher from a Midwestern school, it kind of worked out with Big Owen Schmidt. If you can get a fraction of that kind of success out of Cannon Katzer, a completely and fundamentally different kind of back, again, pushing 5'10", shifty, has speed, will make some things happen in space. One more guy that's going to push that room and add some depth in a running back room that's trying to settle in under Coach Rodriguez. All right, quick reminder to join the conversation by leaving a comment and hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already to keep up on all of our WVU football content. And remember to do business with the folks who do business with us. That includes J.R. Toothman and our friends at Toothman Ford in Grafton, West Virginia, because cars cost less in Grafton. A quick thank you to Fortis and our buddy Rick Lewis for roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed. Be sure to visit fortis.us.com. And a shout out to Tim Johnston and our friends at Johnston Equipment. Be sure to visit them on Route 33 between Weston and Buchanan. Now on to the receiver room that, of course, includes both the slots and the wideouts. And this is a group that Rich has talked about needing not just talent, but volume. They need some more dudes in the rotation right now, or at least coming out of the spring. The issue started with a lack of numbers.
We just don't have enough bodies. I mean, we want somebody obviously who can be that one-on-one guy that you can rely on, and our guys are getting better, getting some confidence in them, but we literally don't have enough bodies to run the way we want to run it.
The numbers need to add up. Now, we'll double back to that in a second in terms of what that might mean and how many receiver bodies Coach Rod's system actually utilizes. But when you look at the group right now, again, start on the perimeter. Cam Vaughn came in from Jack State. Jarrell Williams is a holdover from last year's roster. Jaden Bray, a holdover from last year's roster. Preston Fox is back. That was a great addition to see Preston unretire. Boy, does this room really need him. At the slot position, Rodney Gallagher is back. Orrin Singleton, man from Eastern Michigan. Jared Bowie at the slot from Jacksonville State. There's a couple other freshmen in the mix there. Cyrus, transferred down from Youngstown State, was there in the spring. But when you look at the number of bodies it requires, it's pretty significant. And here's some numbers for you to consider. Now, through the years, Rich has transitioned from what used to be a 10-personnel team that would by and large use 4 receiver sets, much like when we first installed the offense, to it. West Virginia, his first time through, he worked into more of a 20-personnel team, 2 backs, 3 receivers, not using as many receivers as the 4 that he used to use. But more recently, he's become somewhat of an 11-personnel team, a pretty heavy 11-personnel team, a lot of usage there. That means 1 running back, 1 tight end, and 3 receivers. So you'd think, well, you don't need 4 on the field as often. So why would it be an issue with these numbers? Well, you got to remember, when you're a tempo offense, it requires a lot of bodies to rack up those high snap counts and stay fresh and stay full speed. So when you look at what happened at Jacksonville State, for instance, a year ago, Jacksonville State, Cam Vaughn led all receivers at Jacksonville State in terms of snaps played with 618 snaps played. But Jacksonville State actually had 5 receivers that logged 300 or more snaps and 7 receivers that played at least 150 snaps. So you kind of see where he's going with this. You're obviously going to need a 2 deep, but in many instances, it's going to be a 2 deep plus a couple spare swingmen to utilize as well. So that's why it's critical to try and populate this room with some new faces. And since the spring window closed, that is exactly what West Virginia has done. And we're going to talk about the 3 newest faces that have been added to that receiver room, starting with Christian Hamilton. Christian Hamilton arrives at West Virginia, 6 foot, 190 pounds, out of North Carolina. This is a kid who was starting early last year for the Tar Heels. He actually appeared in 10 games at UNC. In those 10 games, he had 10 catches, 187 yards, flashed some big play ability. As we mentioned, starter early last year. Coming out of high school, pretty highly recruited kid. He was projected to play probably in the slot, but he ended up on the perimeter. There's typically a host of reasons that happens. Now, Christian Hamilton doesn't have blistering speed to take the top off of a defense, but he plays smart in space. He has football quickness and football speed, and that's exactly what you want. This is a guy who's game ready, should step in and compete right away. A very solid football player who's played at a high level against solid competition. Christian Hamilton will step into that X and Z room and compete right away. In addition to that, Jordan McCants, 5'11", 173 pounds. Jordan McCants is a guy who also played on the perimeter at Jacksonville State the last couple years for Coach Rod. In his time at Jacksonville State, had 15 catches, 146 yards. He played some slot, but he was primarily utilized on the outside at Jacksonville State. Another guy that logged a lot of snap totals and ate up a lot of snap totals to help that room out. Now, what you should think with a guy like Jordan McCants, his experience in the system brings value to that room right away. And then finally, rounding this group out, you have a receiver out of South Carolina State. So we went small college again on this one, Justin Smith Brown. But don't be deceived. This kid is a legit playmaker. 6'1", 190 pounds, had some issues, got hurt coming out of high school, kind of derailed his recruiting situation, took a year off, then landed at South Carolina State, has really good film. In his 3 years at South Carolina State, highly productive, 81 catches, almost 1,200 yards, averaged almost 15 yards a catch. He has good burst. That showed up on his tape. Again, not necessarily straight line speed, but football quickness and shakes. He's a perimeter guy. Again, will contribute at the X or Z position. He might actually be better in a slot. Who knows? That's one of those experiments that we might never find out just because of his skill set and his body type coming out of high school. But we were looking for guys in the portal to populate those outside positions at X and Z. He has, again, back to the game tape, good ball skills, football speed. I keep going back to that. Now, the thing about him is he's one of the better run after catch guys. He can make things happen with the football in his hand on the perimeter in the quick game. He's a jailbreak screen kind of guy. I've played in offenses in which that was kind of the role that some of these receivers have. Might not be a master of the overall route tree, but has enough shake and bake and enough electricity in his hips to make some things happen in the quick game and the perimeter screen game, find a crease and go. This is a guy that Baylor and App State were both after pretty hard. We know the caliber of receivers that Baylor churns out, so to land him is obviously a big get. And also, a mature kid. Solid addition across the board, has played a lot of football, should be able to step into that room and provide some depth and steal some snaps as you start trying to find a way to divide them up among as many productive bodies as possible. Sticking with the pass catchers, but moving on to the tight end room, post-spring, West Virginia was looking at a tight end room that was populated by guys like Jacob Barrick, the Eastern Panhandle Martinsburg kid who transferred from Jacksonville State, followed Coach Rod up. Gregory Genross, pass-catching tight end. Colin McBee. This is a position group that I think the staff would probably feel comfortable, I know I would, with another contributor or two in this room at some point in the coming weeks or coming months or maybe even coming hours or coming days of this offseason. But there's good news. The addition that West Virginia did bring to this room is a big one. Grayson Barnes, 6'5", 225 pounds, out of Northern Illinois. He might have been Northern Illinois' greatest offensive weapon. He's bona fide, no doubt about it. He could grow into an even more souped-up version of Sean Brown. Sean Brown was a 6'5", 250-pound tight end that Coach Rod had at Jacksonville State in 23 and 24. In 2 seasons, Sean Brown managed to have 30 catches, 475 yards. Now the big numbers, 8 touchdowns, and he averaged 15.8 yards. When your tight end is averaging almost 16 yards a catch, that shows you what you can do within the confines of your offense. And that's just it. With these defenses trigger happy, inclined to play downhill to commit resources and numbers against this West Virginia run game or against Coach Rod's run game at Jack State, those are opportunities for downfield playmakers like Grayson Barnes to come up big. Grayson Barnes could be that kind of player that Sean Brown was, and maybe even take things up a step. Now consider the evolution of this offense. At Arizona in 2014, Coach Rod didn't have a single tight end with a catch. His tight ends at large had 0 catches. So think about the changes that have been made at that position group and the opportunity that a guy like Grayson Barnes could be stepping into. The reason that I say he might in fact have been UNI's best weapon over the course of 2 seasons, he had 54 catches, over 700 yards, 760, 9 touchdowns, and he had an average north of 14 yards per catch. So a playmaking tight end. More good news, he's had 8 contested catches over the last 2 years. So when you see that, that supports the fact that a guy like this is using his frame, his large build to his advantage. Northern Illinois moved him around to try and get the ball to him and create favorable matchups. Grayson Barnes might have been exactly what West Virginia was looking for this portal cycle in the tight end room. If he puts on some weight, again, he comes in 6'5", around 2.25. If he does put on some weight and he gets a little dose of the Mike Joseph effect in the weight room, Grayson Barnes could turn into an NFL kind of tight end. All right, wrapping up this side of the ball with the offensive line, we're going to work our way inside out with the interior offensive line. If you look at what West Virginia is equipped with, among others, at the guard spot, transfer Walter Youngbear was here in the spring, as was Chemo, transferring in from LSU. Cooper Young was a holdover from last year's football team, among others. And then at center, a combination of Landon Livingston, who returned, a newcomer in Robbie Martin. So across the board, we'll get to the tackles in a minute, but starting with the interior offensive line, it was critical for West Virginia to bring in some good and solid depth to foster some competition in this room across the board. You need to go 8, 9, potentially 10 deep. And it's not that you can't find 5 quality starters. What you need is, yes, you need reserves. Yes, you need backups. But you also need some veterans in that room who will push one another. And there was a lot of youth in that West Virginia offensive line room. That, too, needed addressed. So, starting with, on the interior offensive line, you have Carson Lee. Big, strong, 6'3", 320-pound Carson Lee. He's a Colorado kid who started his career with the Buffs before transferring to the MAC to play for Eastern Michigan, where he played with WVU slot receiver Man Singleton, teammates with Orrin Singleton. The Jacksonville State staff, of course, very familiar with those Eastern Michigan teams, as Coach Rod and his staff at Jack State faced Eastern Michigan in both 2023 and 24. Carson Lee at Eastern Michigan logged over 1,100 snaps. Most of those snaps were at center, but he's played both guard spots as well. So versatility, that's obviously an asset that will serve him well as he enters the West Virginia offensive line room. He transferred to Mississippi State in December. Now, it didn't work out, so he jumped back into the portal at the end of spring in this spring window. And when you look at him and break down his game, he has heavy hands. He's very strong at the point of attack. But most critical is his toughness. He does, in fact, play with a hard edge. He's Coach Rod's kind of player. He's a mature veteran. He will lend experience to an offensive line that really doesn't have much in the way of experience. Expect him to compete immediately for reps at center or guard. Moving on to Josh A. Sosa out of Oklahoma, 6'1", 331 pounds. It's easy to be really high on Josh A. Sosa. First of all, when he was at Oklahoma this past spring, he ran with the ones and the twos, the first and second unit, as the center on those units. He's inexperienced, hasn't played a lot of football, but he has all the tools to be special. So once again, we're talking about stepping into a room and providing the kind of talent and the kind of ability that will push the others in that room. It's all about fostering competition to come up with the best five. Now moving outside to the tackle room, West Virginia, again coming out of spring, was looking at a combination of Nick Cray, incredibly talented kid who's been here for a handful of years. Looked like Nick Cray started to turn a corner this spring, and that's very good news for this West Virginia offense. Tykees Crawford, of course, a transfer who came in this semester and played spring ball. Xavier Bosley, been here for a couple years. We know the story. West Virginia kid who played for Coach Rod at Jack State before transferring up, actually beat Coach Rod back to Morgantown. Jameer Davis is a freshman. You have some other young kids in that room, but when you look at what they tried to do in bringing in new faces, Michael Clay, a big man, 6'5", 300 pounds from North Alabama. Interesting story about Michael Clay. He's a Cincinnati kid, so grew up in Ohio. At the junior college level, he went to junior college at the College of DuPage, and he played defensive end up in Illinois at the College of DuPage. You know, he has some nastiness to him, and that's kind of what he plays like. He transferred from the junior college to Northern Alabama, where he became an offensive tackle. He's pretty raw for a guy that's played this much football. And finally, another offensive tackle, Malik Agbo, 6'4", 280, transfers in from the University of Texas. This was a kid who was very highly recruited coming out of high school a couple years ago. Offers from all the blue bloods, the usual suspects. He is really, really athletic. That's what stands out about his game. He's so athletic and smart, in fact, very high football IQ as well. Texas, the Longhorns, Sarkisian, Agbo was the 12 personnel tight end, the blocking tight end in 12 personnel sets for Texas, much like we did with Nick Malone. When you think of Nick Malone at West Virginia, what do we always say? Very talented, versatile kid, but also very smart kid. Both those things hold true with Malik Agbo. Played that blocking tight end, threw the number 80-something jersey on, and logged a lot of reps. And when you think about it, he was part of an offensive line. That was a very talented Texas offensive line. It was tough to crack that lineup. Both of the Longhorns' starting tackles got drafted in the NFL draft this spring. One of them was selected in the top 10. So when you think about it, here was Malik Agbo throwing a different number jersey on and blocking in these 12 personnel sets, while the other tight end, guys like Jatavian Sanders or Gunnar Helm, NFL-type receiving assets, were able to do their job. So a selfless guy, a smart guy, a talented, athletic guy. In 2023, for instance, he logged 131 snaps. 123 of those snaps were at tight end. Expect Malik Agbo to step right in and challenge at one of the tackle spots. Very athletic kid, great addition to this room, and should really help those tackles out right away. Okay, bear with me for just a second. I want to check my phone to make sure no new names have been added since we started taping this episode. Looks like we're in the clear, at least at this juncture. So those are the newest additions on the offensive side of the football. But what about defensively? What shiny new toys has West Virginia brought into the program since spring ball wrapped for new defensive coordinator Zach Alley? Stick around, because that's what we're going to hit on the other side of this quick message. You are in the gun.
For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
ITG will be right back.
The Mountaineers traveled to Hawaii during Week 6 of the 1980 regular season.
After 6,000 miles through 6 time zones, the longest Mountaineer road trip in history, the team was welcomed with the traditional Polynesian greeting. A special transcontinental phone hookup kept the fans back home in touch as Coach Nealon and Woody O'Hara took calls as usual for their weekly radio talk show. Moving the entire football operation to Hawaii for a week was a monumental task, but months of careful preparation eliminated most logistical problems and provided minimal disruption of the all-important practice schedule. A satellite feed beamed the game back to West Virginia via public television, and Mountaineer faithful all over the state tuned in at 1:30 in the morning for live coverage of the contest.
You are in the gun.
Nobody supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cost less, in Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
There are better-known tractors in the world than Coyote. Ones with bigger names, longer histories, more popular hats, cute toy lines. But there's not a single tractor ever been built that's better equipped to do the dirty work. So we'll just focus on what really matters. Coyote, we dig dirt.
Now at Johnston Equipment, get 0% financing or a free loader with low-rate financing on select Coyote models in stock. Visit us on Route 33 between Weston and Buchanan.
We'll assess the team, obviously, from the spring. We'll figure it out from there, depending on the numbers. You know, I'm sure some guys will go in the portal we weren't expecting, and, you know, we may have number changes that, you know, we're not prepared for per se, but we'll obviously go out and address the needs in the portal once it happens. A lot of guys announce early, you know, on Twitter that they're going in the portal when it opens. So you eval those guys, figure out who you want to target, and you know, we'll obviously go after them hard once the portal opens. You kind of know, I would say in the back of my mind, you know, I know that, hey, there might be some attrition here, maybe some attrition there, and so we'll be looking at those particular positions to replace them, you know, but that's to be determined kind of over the next couple of weeks.
That was Mountaineer defensive coordinator Zach Alley at the end of spring ball discussing the staff's strategy to fill the defensive needs that surface, both expected and unexpected, by dipping into the portal this offseason. The Mountaineers have, of course, done just that since the spring window of the transfer portal closed on April 26th. We've talked about the pieces West Virginia has added in recent weeks on the offensive side of the football. Now, on to the defense, where WVU has enhanced all three levels of play, from the D-line to the linebacker room and in the secondary. Let's start at the second level with the linebacker room. First of all, at Mike in the middle, you have a combination returning for West Virginia of Reed Carrico, Ben Cutter, and Caden Beiser. Three hard-nosed football players that have logged a lot of reps. That room might make up for, in toughness, what it lacks in athleticism. Go to the weak side at Wilbacker, a combination of two transfers. Ashton Woods this spring came in from North Carolina, and Chase Wilson out of Colorado State. Now, Chase Wilson, who I think is going to be a critical part of this West Virginia defense, was banged up, did not participate in the spring. So remember that when looking at that weak side backer spot. You have Curtis Jones, a former backer who was moved to the outside to contribute at Bandit and has done very well there since the move. You have Braden Siders, an acquisition through the transfer portal this offseason before the spring. Appears to be a very steady football player. Expect him to contribute. And Keenan Eck at the Bandit spot. And some youth that Coach Castile will try to develop. One of the linebackers West Virginia brought in has a lot of meat on his bones. That's John Lewis, 6'3", 240 pounds. If you go back far enough, he led the state of Florida in tackles with over 200 as a senior. That's high-level football. He moved on to Mississippi State, where he spent 4 years, appearing in 41 games, Played sparingly for the most part, logged 365 total snaps over those 4 seasons, managed 45 tackles. At the end of the season, he transferred, jumped in the portal, and headed to UNLV in December, and then he re-entered the portal in the spring, bringing him to West Virginia. I do expect John Lewis to be a guy that can step in and contribute in that linebacker room. Next up is linebacker Ben Bogle from FCS member Southern Illinois. Bogle is 6'2", 225 pounds. He's very disruptive. Inside backer with lots of experience. He's played a lot of football for the Salukis. 87 total tackles this past season. But here's what gets your attention. Bogle led the Missouri Valley Conference with 16 and a half tackles for loss. He is, as I said, very disruptive. He set a school record in one game with 6.5 TFLs. Expect this veteran linebacker to step in. I don't think he'll shy away from the bright lights and the big stage of Power Conference football. I think he will contribute to this linebacker room, and you'll see him making some plays for West Virginia this fall. And I also expect him to be a factor on the transition units as a special teams player. All right, we're going to move into the secondary and start in the cornerback room, where right now the top 4 players in the rotation for West Virginia at the corner spot were all offseason acquisitions brought in before the spring. Michael Coates and Jason Chambers on one side, Derek Carter, Devontae Golden Nelson on the other, and West Virginia once again dipping into the portal for more help and more depth in the corner room. Bringing in cornerback Nick Taylor from Appy State. Long frame, 6'1", 185 pounds. He played 1 season at App State. 147 snaps is what he logged for West Virginia cornerbacks coach Rod West. So obviously those two have a relationship, very familiar with each other. And that's not the only reunion that will be taking place, as Nick Taylor will also be brought back together with his former teammate at Appy State, cornerback Jason Chambers. Now, a couple interesting things when you start breaking down tape and cross-reference that against the numbers that Nick Taylor posted at Appy State. Yes, Nick Taylor allowed a 79% completion rate when he was targeted in the pass game, but it's tough to get behind this guy. He does believe in deep as the deepest. He had 78 coverage snaps, and yet on those 78 coverage snaps did not allow a 20-yard completion. Didn't allow a pass of 20-plus yards. He's not often inclined to gamble. He won't take a lot of chances. He won't nibble up and get nosy. At App State, Taylor held the opposition to just 8.1 yards per catch. Again, he keeps things in front of him. And he also allowed just 25 total yards after catch. And here's some perspective for you. That 8.1 yards per catch allowed, well, that's the lowest among all Sun Belt Conference corners who allowed 10 or more receptions. Again, this is a guy who likes to keep the football in front of him, and that's something that you can work with. Rod West, familiar with Nick Taylor, just like he was familiar with Jason Chambers. It's going to be interesting to see what kind of contributions can come from this pair of former App State Mountaineers in the West Virginia Mountaineers corner room. Let's kick it back to the safety room and take a look, first of all, at the 2 positions. What's populating that right now for West Virginia as we try and close some deals and enhance each of those 2 positions? Free safety, KK Tarnu. Of course, he played for Coach Rod and Zach Alley at Jack State a couple years ago. He's familiar with the system, helping him direct traffic on that back end as somewhat of a center fielder. In addition to that, Jordan Walker, and then there's Jason Cross, who brings some physicality to the group. And then the other safety position, if you're trying to work your way down towards the box and wreak some havoc and make some things happen and create some problems for the offense, another transfer, Justin Harrington, very talented kid, big frame. Izzy Boyce returns from last year and hopefully is going to do some things for the safety room. So far, 2 safety additions have been made since the close of the spring portal window, starting with 6'2", 180-pound Caleb Gray, junior college kid. Grew up in Texas, went to Dodge City Community College. This is something that came together quickly in late April. He's an asset for this West Virginia back end. If you look at his 2024 numbers, he was productive, 5 passes defended, but he also forced 3 fumbles. He's versatile. He's played corner. He's played free on the back end. And he's also played some nickel in passing situations. And that's probably the biggest asset that he can bring right out of the gate for West Virginia. Long frame at 6'2", good coverage skills. As I mentioned, he's also played some corner, both boundary and field corner. He's comfortable in man coverage, even in press man, getting up in the receiver's grill and forcing the issue. But it's obvious in watching tape that he's also just as comfortable in feeling out the zone as a zone defender. He understands the importance of keeping a lid on the coverage, stays over top of things. When you watch him on tape and see him break and see him react, he has smooth hips. He has good instincts against the pass. He maintains his balance. It's hard to get him out over his skis, and this is what helps him break on the football and make those plays and defend those passes in flight. He's lean, but his physicality will surprise you. Sometimes he'll force the issue on the perimeter as a run stopper, and it kind of wows you as you're watching the tape. You don't expect that from a kid who's a lean 180 pounds. He reads and uses his hands to shed blocks in those situations. So once again, more physical than you might expect out of a kid who is this lean and this wiry in his frame. I think Caleb Gray is a guy who can bring immediate value. Somewhere in this West Virginia secondary, I get the sense that Caleb Gray can contribute right away, whether it's from a depth standpoint or otherwise. You really have to like what you see when you watch Caleb Gray on tape. Now, coming down the stretch with just 2 defensive additions left to break down. We're going to stay on the back end, another safety. And this is a kid, I'm going to have a lot of fun talking about him. Darian Lewis out of Akron. 5'10", $190, very compact build, and he brings it. Lewis was a former Akron teammate of current WVU defensive back Deontay Golden Nelson. Of course, they're reunited in Morgantown. And Darian Lewis, production across the board in his 3 years in Akron. Over 200 career tackles, 15 pass breakups, a couple interceptions. He had one game this past season against Rutgers, a Big Ten opponent. He had 12 tackles. He's very smart. He's very physical. He flies all over the football field with an attitude. He is vicious with a V against the run. Very comfortable near the box. He has a physicality against the pass as well. He knocks receivers off their path. He'll force them to reroute. When I contemplate a West Virginia secondary occupied at some point by a combination of Darian Lewis and Fred Perry, that could be a very scary place for pass catchers. Physical downhill presence, aggressive old school football player, will knock your block off, but as the saying goes, God so rarely gives with both hands. And that seems to be the case when you're breaking down tape on Darian Lewis. His biggest strength is sometimes also his biggest liability. As is the case with most defensive backs who have this aggressive disposition, constantly prowling for contact, he sometimes misses. Only 2 max safeties were targeted more in the pass game. It was apparent that teams were game planning against Darian Lewis, trying to find favorable matchups in space on the back end. And he allowed 6 touchdown passes. That was the second most in the conference. Finally, one little closing nugget on Darian Lewis. I thought this was kind of interesting in my research. His uncle was on LeBron James' high school team. I don't know what that means, but trust me when I say folks who get smacked around by Darian Lewis between the lines in a football game won't need to put up an Oscar-worthy performance like LeBron James does when he gets fouled. And what better place to finish up than moving on down to the defensive line, more specifically the defensive end group, and take a look at those edge rushers. West Virginia's defensive end room coming out of the spring would include names like Jamori Robinson, offseason transfer that was a big splash in the spring, Adam Tomzik, a number of freshmen that are looking to be developed. So West Virginia jumps into the portal after the close of the spring window, and they got themselves a pretty sturdy football player as edge rushers go. D-line edge rusher Eddie Kelly Jr., 6'5", very long frame, very wide wingspan, 277 pounds. So he's got some meat on his bones too. Kelly was most recently in the SEC as a Missouri Tiger. Prior to that, he played at Georgia Tech and started his career as a freshman at South Florida. In 3 seasons, he's been disruptive. 11 tackles for loss. He's produced at each of those 3 stops. And here's an interesting one for you, a metric that speaks to what kind of run defender Eddie Kelly is. There's a metric called average tackle depth. What is the overall average yardage downfield past the line of scrimmage that you make a stop as a defender? Well, Eddie Kelly last year at Missouri, his average tackle depth was less than a yard. It was 0.9 yards past the line of scrimmage. That was the best on the Mizzou defense and among the best in the entire Southeastern Conference. And if you go back 2 years when he was at Georgia Tech, he also had the best average tackle depth among Georgia Tech's defensive line. So this is consistency. We talked about the great length. He has an NFL frame. When you look at his build, when you look at his body, I mean, that's what NFL pass rushers or NFL edge defenders look like, whether it's TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, Nick Bosa, Max Crosby. All these guys are 6'4" or taller with good wingspans. That's what Eddie Kelly is built like. Again, run defender first and foremost, but he also has some opportunities as a pass rusher. That length, when you talk about those types of guys at the NFL level, it helps them create separation from blockers. It prevents offensive linemen from getting a tight grip and gaining leverage on you and moving you around in the pocket as they see fit. Length also helps defenders add different moves to their pass rushing arsenal. He's exceptional as a run defender, but he also has an ability to get after the passer. Over the course of the last 2 years at Missouri and at Georgia Tech, a combined 23 quarterback pressures, and that's nothing to sneeze at for the reps and the snaps that he's been logging. He quickly climbed the portal rankings this offseason, for those of you who are into that kind of thing. He was moving his way up the ladder. But at the end of the day, I think this is a position of need for West Virginia. You need bodies. You need impact in that room. You need talent. Eddie Kelly is a veteran. He's an athlete. He is stout against the run, but he can also be disruptive as a pass rusher. So I think this is a great acquisition for Zach Ellie's defense. And West Virginia is really going to benefit from having Eddie Kelly wearing the old gold and blue. That's a good place to wrap it up, but as mentioned earlier, be sure to be on the lookout for more additions through the portal because the roster continues to be a work in progress that likely won't get settled until probably sometime this summer. Also, a quick reminder to be on the lookout for another upcoming edition of Who Wants to Be a Mountaineer right here on ITG. That's right, everybody's favorite WVU football trivia game show is back for another off season, and we'll be testing our West Virginia football wits and yours right here. So you want to be sure to play along. And remember, of course, the one thing we ask of you is to be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. For Wesley Euler, the Runaway Beer Truck, Owen Schmidt, and Skylar Callahan, I'm Jed Drenning, and you've been In the Gun.
The fun doesn't have to stop here.
Be sure to hit subscribe and never miss an episode.
Join us again next time.
Until then,
tell an ear to tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast.
This mission is over. It's over.